Picture this, a man standing on stage, an Oscar in hand, bathed in the blinding glow of Hollywood's adoration. His name echoed in prestigious halls, synonymous with genius, a master of his craft, capable of captivating millions with a single glance or a nuanced inflection. For decades, he commanded screens both big and small, a true titan of acting, a household name whose presence guaranteed a certain gravitas and undeniable talent. Now, imagine that same man, not on a meticulously crafted set, not in a sprawling, opulent penthouse, but reportedly moving from one temporary hotel room to another. His once lavish life seemingly packed into transient spaces, a stark and almost unimaginable shadow of his former self. This isn't a dramatic movie plot, though the irony of it certainly feels like something pulled from a script. This is the current reality, or at least a deeply personal glimpse into it, for Kevin Spacey. The name Kevin Spacey itself used to conjure immediate images of intricate performances, of characters so deeply etched into the cinematic landscape they became undeniable cultural touchstones. We remember him vividly as the manipulative, brilliant Frank Underwood, orchestrating political machinations with a chilling smile and a whispered aside directly to the audience in the Netflix phenomenon House of Cards. Before that, he was the enigmatic verbal Kint in The Usual Suspects, delivering one of cinema's most iconic twists, a performance that solidified his reputation for psychological depth and cunning.
Hand me the keys, you fucking cocksucker.
He was the conflicted suburban father in American Beauty, a role that earned him an Academy Award for Best Actor, cementing his status at the very pinnacle of his profession. He wasn't just an actor, he was, in many regards, an institution, a performer whose range and intensity were virtually unparalleled. His career trajectory seemed unstoppable, a testament to raw talent and an uncanny ability to inhabit any role, no matter how complex, charming, or unsettling. He was a darling of critics, a respected figure among his peers, and a star whose mere presence could elevate any project from good to extraordinary. The awards piled up, the praise was effusive, and his future in Hollywood seemed as secure and glittering as the gold on his numerous accolades. Yet in a truly stunning turn of events that feels almost unimaginable given that illustrious past, a profoundly different picture has very recently emerged. Just 2 years after he was found not guilty in his high-profile sexual misconduct case in New York, Kevin Spacey has offered a deeply personal and rather shocking revelation about his current living situation. During a recent and candid interview, he openly shared that he has been living in hotels and Airbnbs, explaining with a surprising directness that his extensive and costly legal battles have stripped him of his former home, and, by extension, much of his previous financial stability. This isn't just a casual comment tossed into conversation. It's a profound statement, a public acknowledgement of a life irreversibly altered, fundamentally changed by the storm of allegations and trials. It paints a vivid, almost heartbreaking image of a man adrift, seemingly without a permanent anchor in a world that once celebrated his every move with unwavering enthusiasm. The sheer, almost jarring contrast between the opulence and power he once wielded on screen and the transient, uncertain existence he now describes is truly difficult to reconcile, forcing us to confront the brutal and often public realities of a downfall, not just professional, but intensely personal and undeniably devastating. So, the central questions loom large, casting a long shadow over his once bright career. How did one of Hollywood's most acclaimed and powerful actors, a man who once seemed utterly untouchable, find himself in such a precarious and nomadic existence? What does this latest disclosure, coming directly from Spacey himself, truly signify for his future, both personally and professionally, in an industry that has largely ostracized him? Is this a quiet admission of defeat? A desperate plea for understanding and perhaps even forgiveness? Or is it something else entirely? This startling admission from Kevin Spacey isn't just a fleeting headline. It's a powerful, almost tragic echo of a once shining star, now grappling with the very tangible and undeniable consequences of a scandal that violently shook the entertainment world to its core. Tonight, we are going to meticulously unravel the complex tapestry of events that led Kevin Spacey from the dizzying heights of Hollywood stardom to the humble, temporary confines of hotel rooms. Examining the initial allegations, the subsequent legal battles, the shifting tides of public perception, and the lingering questions that continue to surround one of the industry's most enigmatic and controversial figures. We will delve deep into the specific circumstances that have brought him to this profoundly changed point, exploring the specific allegations that began to surface in late 2017, the grueling and financially draining legal challenges that followed, and the profound, undeniable impact they have had on his life, his career, and his very identity, ultimately seeking to understand the full scope of his current, unexpected predicament. The initial cracks in Kevin Spacey's seemingly unshakable career began to show in late October of 2017, and what followed was an industry earthquake that reshaped his entire professional landscape within weeks. The catalyst for this seismic shift was a single, brave voice, that of actor Anthony Rapp. On October 29, 2017, Rapp came forward in an interview with BuzzFeed News, sharing a deeply troubling account from his past. He alleged that in 1986, when he was just 14 years old and Spacey was 26, Spacey had made an unwanted sexual advance toward him at a party in Spacey's apartment. Rapp described being picked up by Spacey, carried into a bedroom, and Spacey allegedly laying on top of him. Rapp managed to squirm away and leave the apartment, deeply disturbed by the incident. This wasn't just an accusation, it was a deeply personal story that opened the floodgates for a conversation that had been brewing behind closed doors for years. The impact of Rapp's testimony was immediate and catastrophic, sending shockwaves through Hollywood and beyond. Spacey, then at the height of his resurgence as the Machiavellian Frank Underwood on Netflix's critically acclaimed political drama House of Cards, was instantly thrust into an intense public spotlight. But this time, it was a harsh glare of scrutiny, not admiration. The very same day Rapp's story broke, Kevin Spacey issued a statement via Twitter that, rather than quell the rising storm, only intensified it. In his statement, Spacey said he was horrified to hear Rapp's story, claimed he did not remember the alleged incident, but offered a sincere apology for what would have been deeply inappropriate drunken behavior. Crucially, in the same statement, Spacey also chose to publicly come out as gay, stating that he had chosen now to live as a gay man. This decision to conflate a serious allegation of sexual misconduct with his personal sexuality was widely criticized as an attempt to deflect, and drew immense backlash from the LGBTQ+ community and the wider public alike, who saw it as an unacceptable sidestep from accountability.
The consequences for Spacey's professional life were swift and brutal. Within hours of Rapp's story and Spacey's controversial response, Netflix and Media Rights Capital, the studio behind House of Cards, released a joint statement announcing that production on the 6th and final season of the series would be suspended indefinitely. This was an unprecedented move for a show of such global prominence, highlighting the gravity of the situation. The cast and crew, many of whom had been working on the show for years, were left in limbo, their livelihood suddenly uncertain. Over the following days, as more stories began to surface and the public outcry grew louder, Netflix made the definitive decision to sever all ties with Spacey. They announced that he would not be involved in the final season of House of Cards in any capacity, confirming that they would proceed without his character, Frank Underwood. This required a massive creative pivot, with writers scrambling to reconfigure the entire narrative arc to focus solely on Robin Wright's character, Claire Underwood, as the central figure. It was a remarkable testament to the commitment to the show's crew and the desire to salvage the project, even if it meant completely erasing the star around whom it had been built. The production shutdown, the rewrite, and the eventual recommencement of filming without its lead actor carried immense financial implications, reportedly costing millions of dollars, not to mention the emotional toll on everyone involved. But the unraveling of Spacey's career didn't stop with House of Cards. At the time, he had also just completed filming on Ridley Scott's historical thriller, All the Money in the World, where he portrayed the notoriously reclusive billionaire J. Paul Getty. The film was already slated for a prime awards season release in December 2017, with significant marketing campaigns underway. However, as the allegations continued to mount, Scott and Sony Pictures faced an impossible dilemma. Releasing the film with Spacey in such a prominent role felt ethically indefensible and commercially risky. In an unprecedented move that shocked the industry, Ridley Scott announced that all of Spacey's scenes, a staggering amount of footage given his central role, would be reshot with another actor. And not just any actor, but the legendary Christopher Plummer, who was then 87 years old. The decision was a logistical nightmare and a financial gamble of epic proportions, reportedly adding an additional $10 million to the film's budget. The reshoots had to be executed with lightning speed, often involving 18-hour days, to ensure the film could still meet its original release date. Mark Wahlberg and Michelle Williams, the film's other stars, agreed to return for the intensive reshoots, a testament to their dedication to the project and their belief in Scott's vision. The sheer audacity and successful execution of this reshoot further solidified Hollywood's zero-tolerance stance against Spacey, demonstrating that studios were willing to go to extreme lengths to distance themselves from his toxic presence. As Rapp's story gained traction and the industry began its decisive action, a rapid succession of other allegations quickly emerged. Fueled by the Me Too movement and the courage of Rapp, more individuals felt empowered to come forward with their own disturbing accounts involving Spacey. These new allegations spanned decades and often mirrored Rapp's narrative, frequently involving young men and alleged predatory behavior. Reports surfaced from former colleagues, production assistants, and young actors, with some incidents allegedly occurring on sets, in private residences, and even at the Old Vic Theatre in London, where Spacey had served as artistic director for more than a decade. The sheer volume and consistency of these claims painted a grim picture, creating an overwhelming public consensus that Spacey's alleged behavior was not an isolated incident, but a pattern. Netflix, in a further move to sever all ties, also canceled the planned Gore Vidal biopic Gore, starring Spacey, which was already in post-production. The International Academy of Television Arts and Sciences rescinded their decision to honor Spacey with an International Emmy Founders Award, a prestigious accolade that was to be presented just weeks after the allegations surfaced. The swift and decisive actions taken by studios, production companies, and even award organizations underscored the profound shift in Hollywood's approach to such allegations in the wake of the hashtag movement. Spacey's talent, once seen as unparalleled and seemingly indispensable, no longer offered a shield. His agency, his public relations firm, and virtually every professional contact began to drop him, effectively rendering him a pariah in an industry that had once worshipped him. The initial storm of allegations in late 2017 not only decimated his career, but also laid the groundwork for the ensuing complex and highly publicized legal battles that would define the next several years of his life. The world watched as a titan of the screen plummeted from grace, his once glowing reputation shattered by a wave of accusations that Hollywood, this time, was unwilling to ignore. The legal saga surrounding Kevin Spacey, a once towering figure in Hollywood, has unfolded across 2 continents, creating a tangled web of accusations, courtroom drama, and intensely scrutinized personal testimonies. Two significant battles, one civil in the United States and the other criminal in the United Kingdom, have largely defined his public narrative in recent years. We will begin by meticulously deconstructing the civil lawsuit brought against him by actor Anthony Rapp in New York, a case that first put Spacey's conduct under a harsh legal spotlight. The allegations from Anthony Rapp first surfaced in late 2017, right at the precipice of the burgeoning Me Too movement. Rapp, an actor best known for his work on Broadway and in the television series Star Trek Discovery, came forward with a story dating back to 1986. He claimed that when he was just 14 years old, attending a party hosted by Spacey, then 26, he was subjected to an unwanted sexual advance. According to Rapp, Spacey had picked him up, carried him into a bedroom, and laid him on a bed before climbing on top of him. Rapp recounted feeling trapped and frightened, managing to eventually wriggle free and leave the apartment. Spacey's immediate public response was a statement on social media, in which he said he did not recall the incident but offered a deeply regretted apology if it had happened, simultaneously using the opportunity to publicly come out as gay. This apology, as we would later see, became a significant point of contention in the ensuing legal proceedings. 3 years after his initial public statement, in September 2020, Anthony Rapp filed a civil lawsuit against Kevin Spacey in New York federal court. The suit sought $40 million in damages, accusing Spacey of assault, battery, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. Rapp's legal team argued that the alleged 1986 incident had caused lasting psychological harm and professional setbacks for their client. They sought to hold Spacey financially accountable for his actions. Spacey's legal team, in turn, initially attempted to have the case dismissed, arguing on grounds of a statute of limitations, contending that too much time had passed since the alleged incident for it to be legally pursued. However, the court ultimately allowed the case to proceed to trial, setting the stage for a dramatic courtroom showdown. The trial itself commenced in October 2022, unfolding over several weeks in a New York courtroom. From the very start, the opening statements painted starkly contrasting pictures. Rapp's attorney detailed the alleged incident with specific, vivid descriptions, portraying Rapp as a vulnerable teenager whose innocence was violated. They emphasized the power imbalance between the two actors, one a rising star, the other a child actor. The defense, led by attorney Jennifer Keller, countered with a narrative that suggested Rapp had either fabricated the story entirely or had significantly misremembered the events, perhaps seeking attention or opportunistically joining the Me Too wave. They argued that Spacey was not the kind of person to engage in such behavior at that stage of his life. Anthony Rapp took the stand, delivering an emotional and detailed account of the alleged encounter. He described the atmosphere of the party, the surprise of being picked up by Spacey, and the fear he felt when Spacey allegedly pinned him to the bed. He recounted his escape and the long-term emotional repercussions, including struggles with anxiety and trust. Rapp's testimony was central to his case, as his credibility was paramount. He spoke about how the memory had haunted him for decades, impacting his personal relationships and professional life. His lawyers presented evidence of his therapy sessions and journals, aiming to corroborate his long-held distress. When Kevin Spacey himself testified, the courtroom was gripped. He adamantly denied Rapp's account, stating unequivocally that the alleged incident never happened. Spacey's defense rested heavily on his inability to recall any party where Rapp was present or any instance of such an alleged advance. He described his living situation in the 1980s, explaining that he resided in a modest, one-bedroom studio apartment, not a larger dwelling that might have accommodated a bustling party as described by Rapp. He depicted himself as a relatively private and reserved individual in his 20s, more focused on his burgeoning acting career than on hosting large social gatherings. A key part of his testimony involved re-explaining his initial public apology from 2017, stating that he had been advised by his public relations team to apologize reflexively, believing that it was the right thing to do at the height of the Me Too movement, even if he couldn't recall the event. He expressed regret for that specific apology, asserting that it had been misinterpreted as an admission of guilt rather than an expression of general empathy. He even discussed his decision to come out publicly in that same statement, suggesting it was driven by fear and panic in the face of the accusations. Other witnesses were called by both sides. Friends of Rapp testified about his character and the consistency of his story over the years, while therapists spoke about the nature of trauma and memory. Spacey's acquaintances from the 1980s offered insights into his personality and living arrangements at the time. Expert witnesses discussed the nuances of memory formation and retrieval, particularly in the context of traumatic events, and how alcohol consumption could impact recollections. After weeks of testimony and intense legal arguments, the jury deliberated for a remarkably short period, just over an hour. Their verdict was delivered swiftly. Kevin Spacey was found not liable for assault, battery, or intentional infliction of emotional distress. This not guilty verdict in the civil case meant that Anthony Rapp's legal team had failed to prove by a preponderance of the evidence, a lower burden of proof than in criminal cases, that Spacey had committed the alleged acts. For Spacey, this was a significant, albeit incomplete, victory in the court of law, though the court of public opinion remained deeply divided. A visual of the courtroom sketches during the verdict reading showed Spacey visibly emotional, his relief palpable. Just as the dust was settling from the U.S. civil trial, Kevin Spacey found himself facing an even graver legal challenge across the Atlantic. The United Kingdom's justice system was gearing up for a criminal trial stemming from allegations that had begun to surface around the same time as Rapp's in 2017 and 2018. The Metropolitan Police in London had initiated investigations into multiple claims of sexual misconduct. These investigations culminated in June 2022 when Spacey was formally charged with a total of 12 counts of sexual offenses against 4 men. The charges spanned a period between 2001 and 2013, encompassing his time as the artistic director of London's Old Vic Theatre, a period when he was a highly respected and influential figure in the British art scene. The specific charges included sexual assault, indecent assault, and, in one instance, causing a person to engage in penetrative sexual activity without consent, the most serious of the allegations. Spacey made his initial appearance in Westminster Magistrates Court in June 2022, where he formally entered pleas of not guilty to all charges. He was granted unconditional bail, allowing him to return to the United States while awaiting his trial. The case then moved to Southwark Crown Court, where the criminal trial commenced in the summer of 2023. The prosecution, led by Christine Agnew KC, presented a formidable case, painting a picture of Kevin Spacey as a sexual bully and a serial sexual predator. They argued that Spacey, leveraging his immense power, fame, and influence, had preyed on younger men, often in professional or social settings where he held a position of authority. The prosecution's strategy was to demonstrate a pattern of behavior, suggesting that the individual incidents, when viewed collectively, revealed a consistent modus operandi. They described Spacey as someone who had gaslighted victims and who had groped men with impunity, believing he could get away with it due to his celebrity. The court heard detailed accounts from each of the 4 complainants, who gave evidence from behind screens to protect their identities. Complainant A recounted an alleged incident at a London property, describing Spacey touching him inappropriately, leaving him feeling frozen and unable to react. He described the moment vividly, the shock of it, and how he had simply tried to escape the situation. Complainant B's testimony involved multiple alleged incidents. He spoke of a terrifying car ride, what he termed a wolf attack, where Spacey allegedly grabbed his crotch aggressively. He also alleged that Spacey performed oral sex on him while he was asleep, an act that he only realized later. Complainant C detailed an alleged incident at a theater where Spacey's hand had supposedly gone down his trousers without consent. He described the confusion and discomfort he felt in a public yet intimate setting. The most serious allegations came from complainant D, who described an incident at Spacey's London home. He claimed Spacey had aggressively grabbed his crotch, likening the grip to a cobra, followed by an alleged act of penetrative sexual activity without consent. Complainant D also recounted Spacey allegedly making a derogatory comment, something along the lines of "be a man" or "don't be a faggot," after the alleged assault. These testimonies were raw, emotional, and presented with specific details that the prosecution argued were consistent and credible. The defense, led by the highly respected barrister Patrick Gibbs KC, mounted a rigorous challenge to the prosecution's narrative. Their strategy was to emphasize the consensual nature of any interactions, to highlight inconsistencies in the complainant's stories, and to suggest that some accusers were motivated by a desire for fame or financial gain. Gibbs argued that the complaints were based on hazy memories, some deliberate exaggerations, and some untruths. He posited that many of the interactions were flirtatious or consensual, misinterpreted in hindsight, or fabricated entirely. The defense's narrative suggested that Spacey was a generous, albeit flirtatious man, whose gestures of affection had been misconstrued. Kevin Spacey's own testimony in the UK trial was pivotal and extensive, lasting several days. He took the stand and meticulously denied every single allegation against him. He described his life in London, his promiscuous lifestyle, and his habit of flirting, but vehemently insisted that all his sexual encounters had been consensual. For each complainant, he offered an alternative explanation or a direct refutation. He acknowledged that he was a big flirt and had engaged in gentle touches or propositions, but never without a clear indication of consent. He admitted to making advances on some of the men, but maintained that he stopped if there was any sign of disinterest. During his testimony, Spacey became visibly emotional at several points, breaking down in tears as he recounted the impact of the allegations on his life and career, and as he spoke about specific intimate moments he believed were consensual and misinterpreted. He described one alleged incident, which the complainant framed as assault, as a beautiful, intimate moment of consensual closeness. He detailed how he had tried to connect with people, sometimes perhaps clumsily, but never coercively.
The defense also called other witnesses, though their direct relevance to the specific alleged incidents was often limited. Sir Elton John and his husband David Furnish, for example, testified via video link, providing details about parties they hosted where Spacey was present, but they could not shed light on the specific accusations. Other character witnesses spoke about Spacey's generous nature and his devotion to the Old Vic Theatre. Spacey's former driver also testified, offering insights into his schedule and movements, attempting to corroborate Spacey's accounts of his whereabouts or routine. In their closing arguments, the prosecution reiterated their belief in a pattern of predatory behavior, emphasizing the bravery of the complainants in coming forward. They urged the jury to consider the collective weight of the evidence. The defense, in turn, stressed the presumption of innocence, the high burden of proof in a criminal case, and the numerous inconsistencies they claimed existed within the complainant's accounts. Patrick Gibbs, KC, argued that the prosecution had created a smokescreen of allegations, obscuring the truth with unreliable testimony. He implored the jury to focus on reasonable doubt and to not convict Spacey based on public sentiment or sensationalism. After a lengthy deliberation period stretching over 3 days, totaling more than 12 hours, the jury returned its verdicts. On July 26, 2023, Kevin Spacey was found not guilty on all 9 remaining charges of sexual assault, indecent assault, and causing a person to engage in penetrative sexual activity without consent. Some earlier charges had been dropped during the trial. The announcement of the verdict saw Spacey, dressed in a sharp suit, visibly shaking with emotion and relief. He broke down in tears, openly weeping as the not guilty declarations were read for each count. These 2 legal battles, while both concluding with not guilty verdicts for Kevin Spacey, were fundamentally different. The U.S. civil lawsuit with Anthony Rapp had a lower burden of proof, requiring a preponderance of the evidence, meaning it was more likely than not that the alleged events occurred. The goal was financial compensation for damages. The UK criminal trial, on the other hand, had a significantly higher burden of proof, demanding that the prosecution prove Spacey's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt to secure a conviction, which could have resulted in imprisonment. This distinction is crucial to understanding the outcomes. While the courts determined that the prosecution and plaintiff in each case did not meet their respective burdens of proof, these verdicts do not equate to a declaration of Spacey's innocence in the court of public opinion. Rather, they signify that the legal systems, given the evidence presented, found insufficient grounds for conviction or liability. The intricate interplay of differing legal standards, the emotional weight of testimony, and the immense public scrutiny surrounding both trials illustrate the profound complexities of pursuing justice in high-profile sexual misconduct cases. The journey to vindication, while potentially offering a form of public clearance, rarely comes without a monumental cost, and for Kevin Spacey, that price tag has reportedly been astronomical, manifesting as both profound financial devastation and an almost unbearable personal fallout. For years, the actor found himself ensnared in a labyrinth of legal battles, each requiring a formidable defense that chipped away at a fortune once estimated to be in the tens of millions. Consider, for instance, the highly publicized civil trial in New York back in 2022, where Anthony Rapp accused Spacey of sexual assault. While Spacey ultimately prevailed, found not liable by the jury, the process itself was exhaustive. It involved multiple highly skilled attorneys, extensive witness preparation, discovery processes that delve deep into personal histories, and court fees that accumulate relentlessly, hour by hour, day by day. Imagine the towering stacks of legal documents, the endless strategy meetings, the constant travel, and the sheer mental and emotional energy required to navigate such a high-stakes public spectacle.
Then there was the much larger, more protracted criminal trial in London, which concluded in July 2023. Here, Spacey faced a staggering 9 charges of sexual offenses, ranging from indecent assault to sexual assault, brought by 4 different men. Although he was acquitted on all counts, marking a significant legal victory, the defense mounted against such serious allegations in a foreign country would have necessitated an even more complex and expensive legal team. This wasn't just a single lawyer, it was an entire retinue of legal experts, barristers, solicitors, and support staff, all billing at top-tier rates for months, if not years, of preparation and court time. We're talking about legal fees that, according to various reports and industry estimates, would have easily soared into the multi-millions of dollars, acting like a financial black hole, drawing in assets and liquidating savings at an alarming rate. The legal system, even when it ultimately favors the accused, is an incredibly expensive arena, and Spacey's fight stretched across continents and multiple separate cases. Beyond the crushing weight of legal expenses, the allegations brought his once flourishing career to an immediate and catastrophic halt. Before the accusations surfaced in late 2017, Kevin Spacey was at the absolute zenith of his professional life. He was the acclaimed, Emmy-winning star of Netflix's flagship political drama House of Cards, a show that had not only revitalized his career, but had also redefined what prestige television could be. Reportedly earning upwards of $500,000 per episode for the series, a figure unheard of for many actors, his income stream from that single project alone was immense. When Netflix, in response to the allegations, severed all ties and immediately wrote him out of the final season, it wasn't just the loss of a role, it was the abrupt termination of a multi-million-dollar contract, the cessation of lucrative residuals, and the complete collapse of future potential earnings tied to the show's continued success and syndication. This career devastation wasn't confined to House of Cards either. At the time of the initial allegations, Spacey had just completed filming Ridley Scott's crime thriller All the Money in the World. In an unprecedented move, Scott famously decided to reshoot all of Spacey's scenes, replacing him with Christopher Plummer, a decision that not only cost the production millions, but also sent an unmistakable signal to the entire industry. Kevin Spacey was untouchable. Suddenly, his name, once synonymous with gravitas and acting prowess, became a liability.
Future film roles evaporated. Endorsement deals, voiceover work, and any other ancillary income streams that a star of his caliber would typically command vanished overnight. Hollywood, a town built on perception and profitability, essentially blacklisted him, transforming him from an iconic two-time Oscar winner into an industry pariah, effectively unemployed and unemployable in his chosen profession. This massive outflow of cash for legal defense, combined with the absolute cessation of all income, inevitably led to the rapid erosion of his once vast fortune. For someone who had enjoyed decades of success at the highest levels of entertainment, the idea of financial struggle might seem distant, but the reality of his situation quickly became stark. His assets, painstakingly accumulated over a lifetime of work, began to dwindle. One of the most telling indicators of this financial strain was the reported sale of his longtime Baltimore waterfront home. This wasn't just any property. It was a grand, historic mansion spanning over 9,000 square feet, reportedly purchased for nearly $6 million in 2007. It was a symbol of his stability, his success, and his personal sanctuary. The alleged sale of such a significant personal asset underscores a profound need for liquidity, most likely to continue funding his ongoing legal battles and cover mounting expenses without any incoming revenue. To liquidate such a central piece of one's personal portfolio speaks volumes about the depth of the financial hole he found himself in. Moving from a multi-million-dollar estate to, as he recently revealed, a nomadic existence.
Beyond the stark financial realities, the personal toll of these years of public scrutiny and professional ostracization has been immense, arguably even more devastating than the monetary losses. Imagine waking up one day to find your entire life, your reputation, and your public image dissected, judged, and condemned on a global scale. The constant media glare, the relentless headlines, the pervasive cancel culture mentality, it all creates an inescapable pressure cooker of public opinion. For Spacey, an actor whose life was deeply intertwined with public performance and recognition, this sudden professional exile must have been a profoundly isolating experience. The loss of his identity as an actor, a craft he had dedicated his life to, meant not just losing a job, but losing a fundamental part of who he was. The vibrant film sets, the bustling premieres, the camaraderie with colleagues, the creative process, all of it disappeared. This forced isolation extended far beyond the professional sphere. Friends, industry peers, and even casual acquaintances often distance themselves from individuals embroiled in such high-profile controversies, whether out of genuine concern, fear of association, or simply not knowing how to navigate the situation. The psychological impact of facing such a barrage of accusations, defending oneself in court repeatedly, and living under a cloud of global condemnation for years on end is almost unimaginable. The stress, the anxiety, the potential for deep-seated depression, the immense pressure of constantly fighting for your name and your future, these are burdens that weigh heavily on the human spirit. He went from being celebrated on red carpets to reportedly residing in temporary lodgings. This deep sense of personal isolation, combined with the catastrophic financial impact, paints a picture of a man stripped of his former life, his fortune, and his professional standing. This difficult period, marked by legal battles and profound personal shifts, directly leads to his current candid revelation of living in hotels and Airbnbs, a stark and somber reflection of the cost of his long, arduous journey through the public and legal storm. Just 2 years after Kevin Spacey was found not guilty in his high-profile sexual misconduct case, a new report from E! News brought a stark, almost disorienting glimpse into the actor's current reality. It was an interview that caught many by surprise, offering a candid and remarkably open look at a man who had largely retreated from the public eye. In this revealing conversation, Spacey himself pulled back the curtain on a life that is, by all accounts, vastly different from the one he once knew, and, indeed, from the one most people would associate with an Academy Award-winning actor of his caliber.
He confirmed what many had suspected but few had truly grasped. His once illustrious career and the financial stability that came with it has been irrevocably shattered. He openly stated with a sobering directness that he is now financially ruined. This wasn't a carefully worded statement from a publicist or a speculative piece from an unnamed source. It was Kevin Spacey speaking directly, acknowledging the devastating financial fallout from his legal battles.
Financially ruined carries an immense weight, especially when uttered by someone who once commanded millions per film and television series. It implies a complete erosion of wealth, a draining of resources that goes far beyond simply having less money. For Spacey, this ruin reportedly stems from the exorbitant costs associated with defending himself against multiple allegations in various jurisdictions. Legal battles, particularly those involving high-profile individuals and protracted court proceedings, can run into the tens of millions of dollars. Lawyers' fees, court costs, expert witness testimonies, travel expenses, and the sheer volume of paperwork and discovery can quickly deplete even the most substantial fortunes. Think about the multiple trials in different countries, the countless hours billed by legal teams, and the years this process dragged on. Add to that the complete loss of income from acting roles, endorsement deals, and any other lucrative ventures that would normally sustain a star of his magnitude. Before 2017, Spacey was at the peak of his career resurgence with House of Cards, earning an estimated $500,000 per episode. That income stream abruptly ceased, and with it the ability to replenish his dwindling funds. The E! News report really underscored this crushing financial blow, painting a vivid picture of a man who, despite his legal victories, is now navigating an incredibly difficult economic landscape. Perhaps even more striking than the financial admission was Spacey's revelation about his current living situation. He disclosed that he has been living in hotels and Airbnbs, a transient existence that stands in stark contrast to the stable, luxurious residences he would have undoubtedly maintained during his heyday. Imagine that for a moment, a global star, once the owner of grand properties in Los Angeles, New York, and possibly London, now moving from one temporary dwelling to another. This isn't just about financial constraint, it speaks to a profound lack of permanence and stability. Living in hotels means a constant state of packing and unpacking, of living out of suitcases, never truly settling into a personal space. It means the absence of a familiar kitchen, a personal study filled with cherished books, or a garden meticulously cared for. For someone who spent decades building a life of comfort and celebrity, this nomadic existence must be profoundly disorienting. Airbnbs offer a slightly more personalized experience than hotels, but they too are inherently temporary, designed for short stays rather than long-term habitation. This constant rotation of temporary abodes suggests a life stripped down to its bare essentials, devoid of the rootedness and privacy that most people take for granted. It paints a picture of isolation, of a person without a fixed sanctuary to call their own, a profound shift from the private estates and secure compounds one might associate with an actor of his former stature. This current reality is an almost unimaginable departure from Kevin Spacey's life before the first allegations surfaced in 2017. Before that pivotal year, he was not merely an actor, he was an institution. He was the artistic director of the Old Vic Theatre in London, a role that positioned him at the heart of the international art scene, granting him prestige and influence. He was the magnetic lead of Netflix's flagship series House of Cards, a show that redefined television and earned him critical acclaim and a devoted global audience. Photos from that era show him on red carpets, impeccably dressed, surrounded by fellow celebrities and adoring fans, often with a confident, almost regal bearing. He reportedly owned impressive properties, lived a life of considerable luxury, and had an entourage to manage his every need. His name was synonymous with talent, sophistication, and power.
He was a sought-after presence at industry events, a respected peer, and a formidable force in Hollywood. To go from that level of global recognition, artistic control, and opulent living to a transient existence, moving between hotels and Airbnbs with dwindling financial resources, represents one of the most dramatic and public falls from grace in recent memory. It's a seismic shift, a complete reversal of fortune that truly highlights the devastating personal and professional cost of the allegations and subsequent legal battles, regardless of their outcomes. The E! News interview, in its simple directness, brought this stark contrast into sharp, undeniable focus for everyone to see. Now we arrive at a profoundly complex and contentious question. What does the future truly hold for Kevin Spacey in the unforgiving landscape of Hollywood? His legal battles have concluded, culminating in not guilty verdicts across the Atlantic and stateside. The court of law has rendered its decision, but the court of public opinion, and perhaps more importantly, the deeply influential court of industry perception, operates under an entirely different set of rules. This is not simply a matter of legal vindication, it's a profound reckoning with the industry's own moral compass and its evolving standards for accountability versus the possibility of redemption. For many within Hollywood, the not guilty verdicts are a significant development, yet they are far from a clean slate. The industry's initial reaction has been a mix of cautious silence and continued apprehension. On one hand, there are those who quietly lament the loss of what they consider to be one of the most brilliant acting talents of a generation. They might argue that the legal system has spoken and that a person should be allowed to rebuild their life after being cleared of criminal charges. These are often individuals who prioritize artistic merit above all else, or perhaps those who remember working with Spacey during his heyday, recalling a professional, albeit intense, presence on set. One could imagine a veteran producer, perhaps over a hushed phone call, acknowledging Spacey's genius while simultaneously admitting the monumental logistical and public relations nightmare of casting him in a major studio project today. They understand the talent is there, undeniable in its force, but the baggage, the immense shadow of past allegations, looms too large for easy dismissal.
On the other end of the spectrum, a powerful segment of the industry remains steadfast in its belief that the allegations, regardless of criminal acquittal, have irrevocably stained Spacey's reputation. For these voices, often amplified by movements centered on workplace safety and respect, the legal outcome does not erase the lived experiences of those who came forward. They view the acquittals through a lens of legal technicalities or a high burden of proof, rather than a definitive declaration of innocence in a broader moral sense. This perspective highlights the critical distinction between legal culpability and ethical responsibility within a highly scrutinized public profession. A major studio executive, when privately polled, might express concern about the message it would send to their employees, their shareholders, and their audience if they were to re-engage with an actor who has faced such serious public accusations. The brand risk, the potential for boycotts, and the internal dissent from crew members and co-stars who might refuse to work with him are all factors that far outweigh any perceived benefit of his talent. This brings us directly into the heart of the complex and often incendiary debate surrounding what has been broadly labeled cancel culture versus legitimate accountability. Is Kevin Spacey a casualty of an overzealous public eager to condemn, or are the industry's continued hesitations a measured and necessary form of professional accountability, distinct from the legal process? The nuance here is paramount. The legal system, by design, demands an extremely high standard of evidence to strip someone of their freedom. Public opinion and industry ethics, however, operate on a different plane, often influenced by allegations, social narratives, and the perceived moral standing of public figures. The industry, particularly in the post-Me Too era, is acutely aware of its past failures to protect vulnerable individuals and is now often seen as overcorrecting to avoid future complicity. A casting director, for instance, might confess privately that while they acknowledge the legal verdicts, the sheer public relations noise around Spacey makes him an unviable option for almost any project that aims for broad appeal. Their job isn't just about finding talent, it's about finding talent that helps a production succeed without creating unnecessary controversies that can sink a film or series before it even hits the screens. Securing new roles, even modest ones, presents a daunting array of challenges for Spacey. Beyond the immediate reputational concerns, there are practical hurdles that are almost insurmountable. Many productions require actors to be insurable, a standard practice that protects studios from financial losses due to unforeseen circumstances, including an actor's sudden unavailability or, crucially, legal entanglements or public scandals that could halt production. An actor with Spacey's recent history, despite his acquittals, might be deemed too high a liability risk by insurance underwriters, making it prohibitively expensive or even impossible for a production to secure the necessary coverage. Furthermore, major studios, with their sprawling corporate structures and numerous lucrative franchises, operate with an extremely risk-averse mindset. They cannot afford to alienate large segments of their audience or invite negative media scrutiny by associating with a figure deemed controversial. Think of the elaborate visual effects used to remove Spacey from All the Money in the World, or the complete overhaul of House of Cards to write his character out, both actions taken at immense financial cost. These serve as stark, expensive reminders of the potential fallout. Even smaller independent films, which might theoretically be more artistically daring, often rely on external funding and distribution, and thus face similar pressures from investors and distributors who are wary of controversy that could jeopardize their return on investment.
The opinions of those at the front lines, casting directors, producers, and fellow actors, are critically divided and often kept guarded. Casting directors, while always seeking the best talent, are also tasked with assembling a cohesive, professional, and marketable ensemble. They operate under immense pressure from producers and studio executives to avoid any casting choice that could create a PR headache. While they might privately acknowledge Spacey's unparalleled talent, they are also likely to point to the hundreds, if not thousands, of other highly skilled actors who come without such significant public baggage. Why take the risk when there are so many excellent, less problematic alternatives available? Producers, the ultimate decision-makers in many cases, are primarily concerned with a project's financial viability and overall success. For them, casting Spacey, despite his legal victories, would be a calculation of his potential box office draw versus the inevitable negative press cycle, potential loss of sponsorship, and the difficulty of attracting other high-profile talent who might refuse to work alongside him. One can imagine a scenario where a producer might muse, "He's brilliant, yes, but can we actually sell a movie with him in it without alienating half our potential audience?" Among fellow actors, the sentiment is even more complex and deeply personal. Some may quietly express sympathy, believing in the possibility of rehabilitation or simply respecting the outcome of the legal process. These are often actors who have known Spacey for decades or who share a similar philosophy about separating the art from the artist. However, a far more vocal and influential segment of the acting community, particularly those who have been vocal proponents of movements against sexual harassment and assault in Hollywood, would likely balk at the idea of sharing a set with him. For them, the principle of standing with survivors and upholding a safer, more ethical workplace environment transcends legal acquittals. The risk of being seen as complicit or of undermining the progress made in the industry would likely deter many from considering such a collaboration. It's not uncommon to hear of actors making choices based on the reputations of their co-stars, even if it means turning down a role. Looking at other public figures who have attempted to navigate similar controversies offers some illuminating parallels and stark contrasts. Mel Gibson, for instance, faced a very public fall from grace due to anti-Semitic remarks and allegations of domestic abuse. While he never fully regained his status as a top-tier leading man, he found a pathway back primarily through directing, even earning an Oscar nomination for Hacksaw Ridge and taking on supporting roles in less prominent films. His return has been slow, cautious, and never entirely complete, always shadowed by his past. Woody Allen, despite persistent and unproven allegations, continued to make films, often financed by European studios and starring a shrinking but still notable pool of actors willing to work with him. His career dramatically shifted, becoming more niche and less mainstream Hollywood-centric. Louis C.K., after admitting to sexual misconduct, was largely exiled from mainstream comedy and television. He has since self-produced his own specials and embarked on independent stand-up tours, effectively bypassing traditional industry gatekeepers altogether. On the other hand, figures like Bill Cosby, despite his conviction being overturned on a technicality, have seen their careers unequivocally ended, with no path to return to the public eye in a professional capacity. Kevin Spacey's situation stands apart because he has the not guilty verdicts, a legal outcome that distinguishes him from those who admitted wrongdoing. Yet, the overall trajectory of his career post-allegations aligns more closely with the exile narrative seen in many of these other cases, at least for now. The industry's reaction often isn't purely about legal guilt or innocence, but about perceived reputational risk, public acceptability, and the moral calculus that increasingly influences business decisions in the entertainment world. The question of whether Hollywood is ready to forgive or simply to forget remains an open and highly contentious debate, with no easy answers on the horizon for Kevin Spacey.
While Kevin Spacey's personal revelations certainly offer a poignant glimpse into the aftermath of a high-profile legal battle, his story also compels us to look beyond the individual and consider the broader currents shaping our society. It forces us to grapple with profound questions about justice, the nuances of legal outcomes, and the immense power of public perception in an era defined by social reckoning. This isn't just about one actor, it's about the very fabric of how we understand accountability, consequence, and the possibility of a path forward. The #MeToo movement fundamentally reshaped the landscape in which allegations of misconduct are handled, especially for public figures. Before this era, many accusations might have remained whispers, confined to private circles, or dismissed without serious investigation. Now, a spotlight shines intensely on such claims, often leading to immediate and widespread discussion. This shift has brought vital attention to systemic issues, empowering many to come forward and fostering a greater understanding of consent and appropriate conduct. However, it also introduced a new layer of complexity to the justice system, where the court of public opinion often begins its deliberations long before a legal court even convenes. The sheer speed at which information or even unverified claims can proliferate across social media platforms means that reputations can be irrevocably altered in mere hours, often irrespective of the eventual legal findings. This creates a difficult environment where the pursuit of justice can feel intertwined with a rapid-fire societal judgment that is far less structured than traditional legal processes. One of the most critical distinctions we are often forced to confront in these cases is the difference between being found not guilty and being declared innocent. In the legal system, a not guilty verdict simply means that the prosecution did not present sufficient evidence to convince a jury or judge beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant committed the crime. It is a statement about the burden of proof, a cornerstone of Western legal tradition, rather than an absolute declaration of innocence. It does not necessarily mean that the alleged actions did not occur, but rather that the legal standard for conviction was not met. This can be a deeply frustrating concept for many members of the public, particularly those who have followed the details of an accusation closely and perhaps formed their own strong opinions. The justice system is designed to protect against wrongful convictions, and as such, it sets a very high bar for proof. This legal reality often clashes with a public desire for definitive moral clarity, leaving a lingering ambiguity that can be incredibly difficult to reconcile, both for the accused and for those who believe they were harmed. The role of public opinion in shaping careers and lives in these scenarios cannot be overstated. In an age of instant communication and perpetual digital memory, public figures exist under an almost microscopic level of scrutiny. When accusations surface, the reaction can be swift and overwhelming. Sponsors pull out, production studios drop projects, and fan bases fracture. This phenomenon, sometimes referred to as cancel culture, demonstrates the collective power of societal disapproval to impose consequences that extend far beyond any legal ruling. For some, it represents a vital tool for holding powerful individuals accountable when traditional systems fail. For others, it's a dangerous mob mentality that denies due process and rehabilitation. The lasting impact of this public judgment can be financially devastating, professionally crippling, and personally isolating, as Spacey's recent comments suggests. Even when legal charges don't result in conviction, the court of public opinion often renders its own verdict, and that verdict frequently carries more immediate and severe consequences for a public career than any courtroom decision. Think about the countless examples where individuals, even if acquitted, struggle immensely to regain their footing in their chosen industry, facing closed doors and widespread skepticism.
This brings us to a complex, ongoing debate about accountability. If a person is legally cleared, does that erase all questions of accountability for alleged misconduct? Many would argue that moral and ethical accountability can exist independently of legal conviction. While the justice system provides a framework for criminal culpability, it doesn't always encompass the full spectrum of behaviors that might be considered harmful or inappropriate. This perspective suggests that even without a conviction, there can be a societal expectation for individuals to acknowledge past actions, show remorse, and make amends, particularly if those actions cause distress to others. Conversely, others argue that once legally cleared, individuals should be free to move on without perpetual public condemnation, asserting that continued scrutiny amounts to a form of double jeopardy in the court of public opinion. Furthermore, these cases raise profound questions about the concept of rehabilitation or reintegration for public figures who have been accused but legally cleared. Is there a path back into the public eye or into their former professions for those who have faced such allegations? What would that path look like, and who defines the criteria for earning back public trust? Some argue that true rehabilitation requires genuine introspection, acknowledgement of past wrongs, even if not legally proven, and demonstrable efforts to change. Others believe that once cleared, an individual has a right to resume their life and career without perpetual stigma. The challenge lies in the subjective nature of rehabilitation and the varying standards applied by the public, the media, and the industries themselves. A public figure like Spacey living in hotels years after his legal battles highlights the enduring power of these societal judgments and the immense difficulty of truly moving forward. Ultimately, these high-profile cases leave a lasting impact that stretches far beyond the individuals directly involved. They force us to reflect on the strengths and weaknesses of our justice system, the evolving standards of public morality, and the intricate, often messy, interplay between legal outcomes and societal consequences. They encourage us to ponder the immense power of accusations, the complexities of proof, and the long shadow cast by events that touch on deeply personal experiences. It's a conversation without easy answers, leaving all of us to continually assess what justice truly looks like in our modern world. We have journeyed through the extraordinary arc of Kevin Spacey's career, a trajectory that saw him ascend to the very pinnacle of Hollywood, celebrated for his unparalleled talent and a string of iconic performances that etched themselves into cinematic history. From the enigmatic twists of The Usual Suspects to the complex manipulations in House of Cards, he cultivated an image of a masterful actor, a true titan of the screen. Yet, as we have seen, this towering legacy was abruptly overshadowed and ultimately shattered by a wave of grave sexual misconduct allegations that emerged with startling speed and intensity. These allegations sparked a dramatic and very public downfall, triggering a cascade of legal battles that spanned continents and consumed years of his life. We witnessed his swift removal from major projects, the unraveling of his professional life, and the immense financial and personal toll exacted by these complex proceedings. Despite the arduous and often emotionally draining legal process, Spacey was ultimately found not guilty in his sexual misconduct case, a verdict that, while legally exonerating, has not entirely erased the shadow cast over his public image or his standing within the entertainment industry. The consequences, however, have lingered far beyond the courtroom's final gavel. He himself has painted a stark picture of his current reality, a life spent living out of hotels and Airbnbs, a stark contrast to the opulent lifestyle once afforded to a star of his magnitude. This personal revelation offers a poignant glimpse into the profound and enduring ramifications of such public spectacles, underscoring the immense cost of legal defense and the pervasive impact of reputational damage. It forces us to confront the harsh reality that even after a legal acquittal, the path back to normalcy, let alone previous glory, remains fraught with formidable obstacles and lingering questions.
So, as we conclude our look at this complex narrative, the unwritten next chapter for Kevin Spacey hangs heavy with uncertainty. Can an actor of his caliber ever truly reclaim a place in an industry that has largely ostracized him? What does the entertainment world, and indeed the broader public, expect or even demand in terms of rehabilitation or redemption? Is there a possibility for a true comeback? Or will his story forever be defined by the scandal regardless of the legal outcomes? These are not simple questions, and they lead us to a broader contemplation about the very nature of justice, the elusive promise of forgiveness, and the long-term ramifications that public allegations and subsequent legal battles leave not just on a career, but on an individual life caught in the unforgiving glare of the global spotlight.